Boulder Dash receives a mixed bag of reviews, with some people calling it Boulder Trash because of its pretty boring layout and roughness, while some people praising it because of its forceful airtime and intense ride layout. But today, we're going to be looking at what I think of this coaster. So, when I went into Boulder Dash, I did not know what to expect. I mean, just like I said, the reviews on this roller coaster are really conflicting. A lot of people think one thing, a lot of people think another thing. And, unlike a lot of wooden roller coasters where the consensus appears to be agreed upon, on Boulder Dash, I didn't know whether I was going to walk out thinking this would be a rough, not-so-great roller coaster, or a really fun, re-rideable, intense coaster. So, I ride it once in the front row. There was a pretty large line the day I went, but I waited it out. The lines kind of diminished as the day went on, so at the end of the day, I got to ride this 6 times. And I gotta say, I'm a huge fan of this coaster. So first, I wanted to talk about your ride experience. So you're gonna get up to your entrance. It has a pretty interesting entrance. You're gonna walk through these little wood fences. No theming here, but it's like compounds. What do you expect? You're gonna get to your station, and the line will separate about halfway through the queue into whether you want the back side of the train or the front side of the train, basically separating it. And I prefer the front, actually. Actually, I don't really care because the front and back were pretty much identical. The only difference is that the back is a little bit rougher, but in terms of airtime and intensity, the front and back were identical for me. The second row was actually my favorite on this coaster. So you'll turn left out of your station before going into this lift hill. And this coaster is only 115 feet tall when it comes to the drop. However, when it's actually on level, it's probably only maybe 5-10 feet above the ground, which is pretty impressive. I really like this lift hill because you get a nice view of the trees and nature. You can't actually see the park because you're completely secluded, and the chain lift is pretty loose, so you get that nice clickety-clack feeling. Once you get to the top, you'll go into this bit of a pre-drop. It's kind of like a cool right-hand dip, and then here you get really close to the ground where you basically touch the supports. Then you'll go into this drop. This 115-foot drop was okay in the front. There was really nothing special in the front. However, in the back, you really do get some nice drag to it. Following that, you'll do a giant right-hand turn before going up into this pretty forceless airtime hill. You'll then go through a couple of pretty level airtime hills, really no ejector here. You'll just keep picking up speed. This coaster has a maximum speed of 60 miles per hour, and what I like is that it's pretty contained throughout the ride, which is really nice. Following that, you'll go through your first ejector airtime hill before going through a couple of back-to-back airtime hills. And this is where you really start getting airtime. Those first few hills are fairly forceless. So then you're just going to ease around. You get some really cool views of the Rockwork to your right, but it's not fake Rockwork, it's real. And then you go through this really long turn, and basically the first half of the ride is just a bunch of airtime hills. Eventually, you'll curve down before going into this bit of a drop off of the ravine. You'll then just do this giant left-hand turn before hitting a bunch of airtime hills. And these are all back-to-back straight across until you get back to the station. So the ride layout is actually pretty boring. But the experiences and forces you feel during the ride course are not. So that's what's very interesting about this ride. In fact, it reminds me a lot of Lightning Rod at Dollywood. Even though the coaster doesn't really achieve anything spectacular, just goes through a bunch of hills, the hills are really forceful, and they're re-rideable and likable. People complain about the roughness on this coaster. Yeah, it was pretty rough, but I don't really mind that. In 2013, the ride received a change to where the triple up in the in the second half of track got changed to a double up. I didn't really notice this change that much. You can tell the old wood apart from the new wood, but when you're actually riding it, it feels about the same. So the parts that are going through the woods I thought were pretty smooth compared to something like the Beast where you're getting pretty beaten up. I thought it was fine. I don't mind roughness in a roller coaster. I know some people do, but personally, I did not think the roughness was a problem. Definitely the highlight of the coaster for me was the airtime. This doesn't have the best airtime on any wooden roller coaster I've experienced, but for being a pretty old coaster, it's 18 years old, has pretty nice airtime. And one thing that's interesting about Boulder Dash is that it's kind of between a GCI and a classic coaster. Because I wouldn't really call this coaster classic. It's really only 18 years old. But it also feels kind of like a GCI in that it's really fast-paced, but it also feels like an old coaster because it's rickety. So Boulder Dash really does combine those two feelings of sentiment. So I do think it's kind of underrated in that sense. So Boulder Dash is great. It ranks personally, I think, as my number 16. And for a final grade, I will be giving Boulder Dash a B+. I think it could be better. The trains are pretty uncomfortable. So if it got better trains, maybe a couple spots where it could have been just a little bit smoother. Again, that doesn't really hinder it from me putting it any higher in my rankings, but it does hinder it me grading it higher. So yeah, that wraps up my thoughts on Boulder Dash at Lake Compounds in Bristol, Connecticut. Be sure to leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. I will catch you all in the next video.